Also this afternoon, this. Women should be protected under expanded hate crime laws, according to a new report from the Law Commission. The independent body that advises the government said misogyny should be treated in the same way as any other discrimination when it comes to motivation for a crime. Currently, the groups and characteristics protected by law include race, religion, sexual orientation, disability, and transgender identity. The new proposals on misogyny are part of a wider consultation into existing hate crime laws, which have received criticism for their complexity and the different degrees of protection offered to different characteristics. Assault, criminal damage and harassment have longer sentences when the perpetrator's motive is prejudice or hatred towards a certain group. Let's speak with Stella Creasy, Labour MP for Walthamstow, regularly campaigned for hate crime laws to be reviewed. Stella, afternoon to you. Now, you can already see, just reading out the story, more or less here, I can see where the detractors of this are coming from. Is it a lack of clarity that's needed here?
Well, detractors in the current situation or these proposals?
Well, certainly when you put the headline up there that making it an offence to tell a joke about a woman, which I know it's not about that, by the way, but that's clearly...
Who's put that headline up there?
Have you not looked at Twitter lately, Stella? Have you seen that kind of caper that's going on there?
I'm looking at what the Law Commission is saying.
Well, indeed.
Nothing that isn't already a crime.
Well, that's the point, isn't it?
Being proposed.
So put to bed then the rumours of what it isn't and what it actually would be if this were to come into full law.
This is really, really simple. There's a gap in our hate crime legislation right now where women are protected in their workplace, but not if they step out onto the streets or if they go home, from being targeted just for being who they are. There is no new crimes being created here. This is about recognising the motivation behind the crimes that they experience, because that better helps us being able to track those crimes and prevent them. Who doesn't want to live in a society where more people are free from fear of harm for just being who they are?
But those laws are already there, aren't they? If you punch somebody, hurt somebody, rob somebody, mug somebody, that is an offence.
But sadly, what we know is all too often violence against women doesn't get taken seriously, that we don't record this data. We do know that 7 police forces in this country are already doing it, and it does make a difference. It's helped transform the experience of victims of violence against women in those communities and better help track those who are committing these crimes. This is an evidence-based process.
Yeah, no, I understand that. What is again, a lot of this is just about clarification. And again, I refer back to the mischief that we see on social media. And I'm sure, like myself, we largely ignore some of that stuff. But it's interesting how stories have a habit of morphing into something completely different. So help us to understand a little here, Stella. What is the difference then between whether somebody stole my phone and punched me or stole your phone and punched you?
Well, do you get abused for being a man, Ian? Do you get abuse about how you look? Do you have people following down the street late at night trying to grope your breasts? I've had that happen to me. Have you seen the statistics about rape and violent assault of women in this country? Have you seen how domestic violence and street harassment has soared during lockdown? This is about the evidence of the violence and harm that women face and being able to recognise that in our sentencing process and getting the police to record it so they can better track and prevent those crimes. Now, when we do that, we can help keep more people safe. I'm very pleased for you, Ian, that you probably don't experience the same level of misogynistic abuse that I do. You might experience some, but surely it's not okay to target somebody simply for something that is an innate part of their identity.
It's absolutely
we don't accept it for racist abuse. Why should we accept it for misogynistic abuse?
I agree. It's absolutely not acceptable. And if I had a pound for every female friend that has told me similar stories to the one that you've just told me, you know, I get all of that. But of course, there will be nonetheless still a component of, this is not, I'm not trying to hammer home a men versus women thing here, but I'm just intrigued as to what would happen if it was smaller in amounts, but if it was a man that was on the receiving end of a crime that was based on his maleness.
Oh, well, and the Law Commission has said they're happy to take evidence on that. What we've done is work for the last 2 years with a wide range of organisations, including Hope Not Hate and Stonewall and the Fawcett Society and Refuge and Women's Aid and Citizens UK, to gather the evidence that shows that overwhelmingly women are targeted for who they are, and to recognise that one of the things about hate crime is when you recognise that within the criminal justice system, you send a very strong message that it's not for the victims to tolerate that behaviour and find ways to avoid it. It's for society to tackle it. Now, if there is the same evidence that that's happening to men, then absolutely that should be committed to the Law Commission. My focus has been about how we can tackle that violence against women epidemic that we're facing in this country. It's not an either or.
Yeah, no, indeed. And if I gave an example earlier on, as many had. If you take an old-fashioned comedian who's doing mother-in-law jokes, does that sit within this? I mean, you wouldn't have the same old-fashioned comedian. I often wonder what these old boys still talk about, because once upon a time they would do jokes about people's colour and things like that. But I'm sure many of them still do the mother-in-law stuff. Does that sit in the same sphere of abuse?
Well, you tell me, Ian. As you said, people might previously have made racist or religiously offensive comments, and we now have a hate crime framework in this country that both protects free speech but also says it's not acceptable to target people and leave people living in fear. Why would we not extend that same protection, that same liberation from that abuse and harassment to 51% of the population?
Mother-in-laws, of course, are women's mother-in-laws as well as men's mother-in-laws. Does that make it any different?
But I think you're trying to draw a comparison. There's nothing we're talking about that isn't already a crime. Actually harassing somebody in the street. I mean, I've always said I will stop campaigning to make misogyny a hate crime when I go to the wedding where the bride gets up and says, well, I met him because he followed me down the street trying to grab my bum, shouting, get in the back of the van. And I thought it was the most romantic thing someone had ever done. That's not what happens. 2/3 of women in this country report experience sexual harassment when they walk down the streets. 1/3 of young women say they don't go out, they change their plans because they're frightened of that experience. That is the mothers-in-laws, the sisters, the nieces, and the aunts, and the daughters of the people who are listening, as well as people like myself. Why should our lives, our freedoms be curtailed because there is a group of people who don't respect our right to be who we are, who feel that they can touch and abuse and harass people? So that's what we're talking about here. Okay. We're not talking about mother-in-law jokes. And indeed, in the areas where this already happens, it's not wolf whistling that women are coming forward to report. It's serious sexual assault, it's kidnap, it's rape. But they know they will be believed, and they know the police will take it seriously and track what's happening in their community. So surely that's a good thing.
Of course it is. And that's, as we all know, already illegal. Would that mean, as I said in the intro, at the moment, if there is a hatred component to one's motive based on race or religion, transgender, those kind of things, that would increase the sentence? Is this would fall into the same category? So if a woman was groped in the street, followed, and had unpleasant things happen, that would clearly already be a crime. Would this new law, should it come into being, mean that there would be extra time added for the misogynist element of that crime?
Yes, if it could be proved. It's exactly the same thing as if somebody targets people because of the colour of their skin or their sexuality, which we use our hate crime to send that clear message that it's not okay, that we shouldn't expect the people experiencing that put up with it. Why do we expect women to put up with being groped in a public place, or assault or sexual violence? We say it's illegal, but the figures show that we don't treat it as seriously as we could do. That's why the Law Commission has today said, yes, they recognise it's a case for filling that gap. And, one of the things about this proposal that's really important is it means right now there's a lot of women who have to choose a side of their identity if they're attacked. Muslim women who have to come forward with their religious background, or lesbians who have to come forward, or transgender women who have to point out that side of their identity rather than being seen for who they are, and the fact that they're being attacked because they're both a woman and transgender, because they're both a lesbian and a woman. This is going to help us be much better at tackling crime, but it's also going to send a message about what the 21st century is like, and why nobody should feel hassled just because of who they are, just going about their daily business.
And just a final point, and sorry to come back to it, Stella, but I think it's quite important at the moment. We talk a lot about free speech and where that sits and stands. We know that in Scotland, the SNP are attempting to advance an element or a revision of current hate crime laws, which is really dividing the room, cross-party dividing the room as well, in terms of whether that alters freedom of speech for playwrights, for authors, for novelists, the right to offend, and all that goes with it. And again, with this, because we are talking about gender here, I mean, naturally, there will be people who have opinions, want to talk about the differences in genders, want to make jokes about the differences in genders. Is that likely to be hoovered up in any of this? Because that would be concerning.
If you want to continue to make crass comments about mothers-in-law, Ian, that won't change because of this. What we've seen is that we as a society have recognised where racism, where racial hatred has no place because it holds us back. That is both a matter of criminal action, but also cultural change. What we hope with this is, yes, we'll see that important criminal action on tackling violence against women, but we'll also see that cultural change that says that wolf whistling isn't cute, it's crass, it's creepy. And actually, the men that we all know and love, and the men who hate when other men do it, can stand up and finally say in the 21st century, give it a rest.
I would never and have never wolf whistled anyone, Stella. I'm a little uncomfortable with whether we send people to jail for doing it.
Nobody's talking about sending people to jail for wolf whistling, although it is technically already a crime because it's a form of public harassment. What we are talking about doing is learning from the evidence of those 7 police forces where they're already doing this and how it's improving tackling violence against women and making sure that women don't live in fear of harassment.
Stella Creasy, thank you. Labour MP for Walthamstow, who is, as we mentioned there at the beginning, campaigning and has campaigned for many years for hate crime laws to be reviewed. I certainly get it. And again, I can stand by what I said to Stella Creasy there. I lost count of the amount of female mates who tell horrendous stories that us blokes do not experience in the same way. Does that become a separate law? And yes, we should watch out for laws as to whether they begin to infringe in other aspects. And I hope that anyone who's advancing this law will be mindful of that as well.